Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in. Grey War Commander, I don't know what to say. I had high hopes for this, and wow, it crushed my expectations. This is fabulous. Now, I want to take time today to kind of talk about Great War Commander and why I thoroughly enjoy this, and why I think this is a great addition to the series. I know it's not Chad Jensen, but it is in every bit in the spirit. I mean, it's lovely. And what I want to do is, this is totally unscripted. I don't script anything, so I'm just going to be talking at random here about different things. I brought out Combat Commander Europe so we could maybe compare some components and take a look at how the game has evolved quite a bit. Because it's an experience. This is really good, and I don't have a sample map set up. So what we'll do is, as we talk about a few things, I'll put the map out. I'll kind of share some experiences that happened while we were playing it. And actually, my son and I played this weekend, and it's amazing. It's really good. I forgot how much I enjoyed this series until I played this again. Now, I will say this though. I mean, it's a combat commander game set in World War I, so Great War Commander makes sense. So if you hated, and this is the thing about the Commander series, if I'm going to call it the Commander series, right? If you really hate the card-driven aspect and the randomness that it brings, you probably won't like this because it's still there. In fact, when I set this up to play with my kid, I hadn't even read the rules. I just set it up and kind of guessed my way through setup and whatnot, and we just started playing because it's a Commander series game. And as we went through orders, there's a few new orders I had to look up, but I think we got it figured out, and I found some of the differences right away, and the similarities are there, that we had a blast. So as I'm explaining things to you, if I get something wrong, it's because, you know, like I said, I hadn't thoroughly read the rules. We just sat down and played and loved it. All right, so let's talk about some of the things I love. Let's set the box aside here. That's my, hopefully YouTube will pick this up and give that to me as a thumbnail option. All right, so first of all, we've done a little video where we looked at some components, the pieces in the counter tray. These are platoons. In Combat Commander Europe, you're dealing with squads, but these are platoons. And I think it works out pretty good. At first, I was kind of like, I had to change my mindset from the fact that, like, this is a squad in Combat Commander Europe to, are you going to focus? Focus. Do the hand trick there. Maybe that will help. There you go. To being that this is a platoon. And in actuality, it's okay. It works out because there's 4 figures. And if you just do a, roundabout assumption that there's 4 squads in a platoon, that's great. So the counters will fit that narrative. You have your equipment that you can attach to it. There's several different types of infantry units for the Germans. You have a couple different types of French and Americans. And that part is all the same. And the numbers are all the same. So nothing's really changed. Like, base mechanics are pretty much there. So when you're looking at your troops, starting with the 2 here, since I am trying to hold this and keep it focused. I should put a graphic up, but, I don't do that. I'm not that fancy yet. Oh, I can't even hold that straight for you. So the 2 would be your firepower, 4 is the range, and then that 7 is movement. This was a hero that I grabbed. Because my son generated a hero and he thought the hero was awesome. But so the numbers are the same, and then for the leaders they got the hex with the number modifier, how many hexes they can affect. Let's see if we can get a leader up here, and then that's the bonus they infer to combat and things like that. And then 10 is the morale of the troop. So the components, I mean, it's all the same numbers, everything. The numbers might just be different slightly because, you're dealing with different era of troops, but the counter layout is the same. Same with equipment. So we grab, this isn't the machine gun that you use in the first scenario. Let me see, I put it in here. This here, womp. So on a machine gun unit, the layout's the same. So the first number is the firepower of that machine gun. Second number is range, and then finally you have movement. I try to remember it as the word firm. Firepower, range, movement. So this movement is a -2, meaning that whoever it's attached to, they lose 2 movement points, because that's what it takes to carry this thing around. And that abstractly simulates, you know, the need to tear it down, move it, set it back up, and stuff like that. So the troop carrying it, they don't get to move as far. So yeah, again, nothing unfamiliar. They have some new terrain pieces, I could call it. The scenario that we played really didn't use anything. I did draw at one point like an engineer card, and we did lay down some barbed wire, but I only got one card drawn for the entire game, and I placed it in a spot that nobody ever bothered walking through, so we didn't really get to test out the wire and how that works. Then you have, these were foxholes, and the other side is a crater. Normally on the map you see a bunch of like shell holes and craters on the map, but those are actually just more for graphical presentations. If you want to have craters that actually do something, for the most part, they actually have a counter you can put out where that provides enough cover to actually be a benefit. Then there's markers that you use for marking the barrages. So artillery. The scenario that we played did not have artillery, so I didn't get to play with that. But the artillery example in the book, artillery is actually very detailed in this. They have like walking barrages and different types of artillery that really have that feel of World War I. Like, oh my goodness, this would be devastating to be under. And it, you know, puts out a bunch of stuff. And the examples in the book is you got all these counters that you place, and it looks impressive. All right, so that might be a little bit new. We didn't really have the barrages. And then again, this scenario too did not use trenches, but they actually have this trench piece. So you could have trenches, and then later like a whole bunch of foxholes you might dig. So a lot of different terrain pieces that we didn't have in Combat Commander Europe, but definitely fit the feel and flavor of what we have here in the Great War. Then you have a lot of similar admin counters. There's the veteran, the suppressed tokens, the objective markers. So a lot of that is things we're already really familiar with. So let's just kind of pretend here for a second that we're looking at the game. We play, well, first of all, like I said, I didn't script this out, all right? So forgive me, just kind of go on the journey with me. One of the journeys, I will say, is the initiative card. So just like with Combat Commander Europe, there is an initiative card. The thing is, though, the card for Combat Commander actually has the rules. You know, there might be more to it in the book, but I mean, this is a great reminder that the initiative lets you re-roll. It's also, after a sudden death game, if there was like a tie and victory points, this would go to the person, the game would go to the person with the initiative card. Great reminder of the power of the initiative card. This is a beautifully artworked card. Stunning. I love it. My son was even looking at it. We played the French and German scenario 1. Well, actually, but he saw this one. He was like, ooh la la, look at the way she handles that rifle. And I'm like, oh, my son. But yeah, they're awesome to look at. I mean, it's great. But we kind of forgot. I remember at the beginning of the game telling my son, you know, here's the initiative card, and this will let you re-roll a die. And then at the end, if there's a tie and victory points, this will go to the win will go to the person with the card. And then we never used it. And to be fair, not that I use this initiative card all that often in the regular game, but every time I glance over at it, I'm reminded that I have it and what it's for. This, pretty much, I gave it to my son who played the German player at the beginning of the game because he was playing Germany. And that was, you know, his way of knowing that he got to go first. Not once during the game, even after we discussed it, did anybody even think to use it. And I think it's because, and that could be us. I'm not going to say that other people have the same memory problems we have, but there was no reminder on the card that, oh yeah, I can use this for dice re-rolls and things like that. So that's one difference there. I still love this card and I'll still use it. And as I play more, then hopefully my mind will be reminded that, oh yeah, there's a purpose for the initiative card. The playbook, I really didn't need the playbook at all. The playbook mostly has the random battle generator, random scenario generator, and then it has an example of play. And like I said, I just jumped right into the game. The one thing at the end though, the design notes, I haven't read them. I usually like to read the design notes right away, but again, I just jumped straight into playing. I didn't read anything. I was just so excited to get my hands on the components that I haven't taken the time to really go through the playbook yet. And honestly, probably the only thing I'm really going to read will be the design notes. I should still read the example of play because I'm sure there are things that we got wrong. But that's due to me just getting in there and playing. And I think honestly that anybody who has played the series before could probably do the same thing. There's only a couple of orders that I found were new. And once you look that order up, I think you're going to be fine. But I'm going to point out one thing that we learned that I think is unique to Great War Commander. Well, a couple of things. One is you do have these strategic cards that each nation has. So what you do, let me pull some of these out. I've got the deck of cards here split. But you get these cards, you lay them out. There's 9. So you're going to have 9 of these cards. And what it says is, during your turn, you draw one. Like if you got here, you have your deck of 9 cards. So each player is allowed to play only one strategic card per turn. Playing a strategic card never counts against your maximum order limit. So that's nice. You get to play this. And our scenario, and we'll talk about scenario setup here in a moment, but as the French player, I was allowed to have 2 orders per turn. So was the German player. But you can play 1 card, and it doesn't count against your orders. And then when so then it says here, each player shuffles a strategy card to form a draw pile, and you draw 1 card, and then you play it. So when the time advance occurs, any player not holding a strategic card can draw 1 and is allowed to play it from the next turn onward. Player cannot play it on the same turn in which he is passing. So if you pass to do discards, you couldn't play it. When a strategy card deck is depleted, the owning player cannot draw any more strategic cards. So here's the thing. The cards, I'm not going to say that they're game breaking. And it's not, because you don't get that many of them throughout the game. Like here's one, air dominance. Cancel an enemy air assault order, or in your turn launch 2 consecutive air assault orders. It's nothing, I don't think they're going to overpower the game. I think they add some more of that chaos and flavor. So your opponent, in this case, your opponent lays down, they're going to do an air assault and you lay out the BAM! No, you're not. I don't think it's any different than if you had an action in your hand that would allow you to cancel something. I think some of these add real flavor to the nationality that you're playing. So this was something new that we had to learn about. So the strategy cards I think are good. I mean, you might say, well, they're not game breaking. They annoy the person you're playing against to no end. So I'll say that. Here's one. Use this card as an ambush action to get +1 to a single roll. There's a couple other like that. But again, as we were playing, a +1 bonus to hit or something like that didn't make a whole lot of difference in the game, because we were having rolls that were 15, 16 in the attack, and having just that 1 point didn't seem to sway the game a whole lot. So anyway, just to point something out, yes, they're strategy cards. You don't get a whole lot of them, and they don't break the game at all. I think they're fine. They're just about as annoying as any random event that might come up. Okay, so one other thing that I read about that was different and caught my eye, and I'm trying to find it here. It's the leader, highest ranking leader. All right, so this is an interesting rule as well. And you didn't see this in Combat Commander Europe, but it makes sense here from the World War I perspective. Essentially, they have a system, a little rule system here, that helps you identify the highest ranking leader on the battlefield. Generally, that's pretty easy. Like the first scenario, we had like a captain and a lieutenant each, and so the captain is the highest ranking guy on the field. And what would happen is when you activate the highest ranking leader, he in turn can then activate subordinate leaders under him, and then if they have any leaders in range of them, they can activate that. It creates a chain of activation, and here's like an example picture of it. So for example, if I've got a leader here of 1, and here's a leader within 2, I could activate the highest ranking leader, and then as he just creates that chain. Like, so here we have a leader that's 2 hexes away. So if I activate him, he could activate this guy who could activate something 1 hex away. And then I could activate this leader over here who could then in turn activate another leader who might be out 2 hexes away. You probably can't see the picture very well. It's kind of far away. But this leader has a range of 2 hexes away. Here's another leader with a range of 2 influence who could activate units out to 2 hexes away. So it just creates a chain of activation. And when we played, I think without having, I'd have to dig back through the rules again real quick. I think they had to be adjacent in order for that to work. I don't think they had to be adjacent for this specific item. Let me just double check real quick. Within this command, all leaders activated by the effect of the original activation of the highest ranking leader, and then they pass their activation further and further down the line. They're activated for the rest of the turn and considered activated by the same leader. So they can form a fire group. Okay, so it doesn't say they have to be adjacent. There is another command in here where they need to be adjacent. We'll talk about that one. But essentially, though, this allows you to visually, in my mind, and my son used this at the beginning of our first scenario, you get this chain of folks that are activated, and they all move forward, or whatever order you're given. And it's like, oh yeah, and my son, because he's such a drama person, he was like whistling. He was like, and I'm like, why are you whistling? He goes, well, because they always blew a whistle before they, launched their charge. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's exactly what's happening. Is some guy down there on the ground is blowing the whistle, and all of a sudden you just see this row of people going. And even in some of the rules, as I read through up on this, they mentioned that replicating the human wave, and especially that's for a command called offensive that we'll look at. So I was like, oh man, this is just screaming World War I. Now I had to admit, my son and I are not historians in the traditional sense. We get a lot of our knowledge from Netflix and the History Channel and things like that, Wikipedia. So our knowledge of things might not be very extensive, but from what we've seen, this really did make us think of World War I. You got the line of troops moving up, and then that would lead us to one of the orders here. And I know the book is not zoomed in. I'm just explaining you. There was a new order called offensive, which is similar. You would activate and create a chain, and they got to be adjacent. If I remember this, one of these, they had to be adjacent. All formations not activated turn are eligible. Yeah, at least 2 formations in any combination of types must be activated. No upper limit. One of them must be a leader, not a tank leader. And then to be activated, they must be unbroken and adjacent to at least one other formation. So slightly different than the highest ranking officer set. The offensive, you still have to have an officer, but then there has to be an unbroken chain, a line of people. And then you would activate that chain and they would move, and then after the move, they get to execute a fire order. Formation in the offensive order are considered activated for moving, then the fire attack. So once the movement step is completed, the activated units and leaders that have physically entered a new hex may make 1 fire attack. All ordinary fire rules, including fire group, apply. Weapons of any type and tanks cannot fire. So it would just be the people, because I know sometimes you move your wave forward and you have special weapons attached, but this is saying that these people are the human wave coming over, blow your whistle, and they're coming at you. They don't have time themselves to put up their machine gun. If you want that, you might have to leave that behind, have the machine guns fire, and then have your human wave. But yeah, so evocative. The whole time we were playing, like, we were just like, oh, this is so visually appealing. For the Germans, it was. Let's take a look here. I'm not going to set up the entire scenario one, right? But I'm going to give you a little bit of a story here. First, we start by selecting our scenario. We chose scenario one. Let me grab the scenario card for that. Alright, so here's scenario one. I'll point out a few things of interest here. Where's my tweezers? Alright, so again, I know you can't read this very well from where we're at. You can see it, but I'll point out a few things. So, just like a regular combat commander game, you have your troops per side. So here's your German forces, here's the French forces. Then it mentions your surrender value. Now, unlike Combat Commander Europe has a, let's see here. This thing used to be kind of cluttered. I don't know. I love-hate relationship with this tracker. But the thing is with the tracker though, you could put down a counter for the year. You got to put down your OB display so that you could say if your troops were elite, and then how many orders they had that they could play. Had where you do your objective chits, had little reminders on terrain, had your casualty tracker where the weapons go. Had a nice tracking display. Some people thought this was a little big. I think it worked out fine. They don't have this. All of this information that you need, most of the information you need, is actually going to be on the map. So let's grab a map. Ugh. This is only important because this is the part I had to figure out during the setup. So you have on your map, there's the time track. You have here the victory points tracker. Then you have your casualty track for both sides. And then here they had a track where you could put your attack factor. Here was a spot to put weapons. Here's the spot where you put your objectives. And then here's where you put your radios for doing your different types of artillery, which we didn't have artillery. So I had this off camera and I was explaining. I'm sorry, let's rewind that. So here's your time track, here's your victory point tracker, here's your casualty tracker, here's where you track your attack strength, here's where you put the weapons that are lost, here's where you put your objectives, your secret objectives, here's where your radios go, and then there's the board you play on. Anyway, we played on map 6, so I'd have to unfold this here. So we played on map 6 for scenario number 1. And you didn't even use the whole map. Honestly, we just kind of played in this section. My son, when he did his initial setup, he was all along this southern line, and he quickly moved everything here because the initial French forces, it tells you where they're placed, and they're kind of spread out here in this city. And, you know, it's okay. A couple units were down here. He had a couple units back here. Basically, the French, it's almost as if they didn't even know an attack was coming. All right, so how did we set this up? So again, you have your troops. Over here is the little story. And then down here, it tells you the time where the sudden death goes. This mission started, the time was on 2, and sudden death was 8. Let me just tell you, we didn't even get through a deck of cards, and we didn't even draw our time card. This game was over before we made a full cycle. Now I'm going to say, because I couldn't find this in the rules, and somebody can correct me in the comments, please, because I looked for it in the rules, and I guess honestly I don't remember exactly what I was even looking for, but I thought there was a rule that if both players pass, like if all of my units have activated, I don't know. There was something I might be thinking wrong. It's just that we played an entire game. We didn't even expend our draw deck once, and neither one of us for dice rolls ever pulled a time card. So we played this entire game, and technically we never left turn 2. And I thought we might be missing something. maybe that's normal. We were just lucky, I guess. That's part of the randomness, and I think that's part of what people don't like. You never know when a turn is going to end, and it never ended for us. We played the entire game on one turn. All right, then you have your victory point marker. French started with 1 victory point, even though I controlled all the objectives. And my son and I were like, well, we'll go with it. That's what it says. And then as victory points change, victory points aren't worth, or not victory point, the objective points aren't worth victory points unless it's one of your secret objectives that you pull, and then it's worth a victory point. So we just kept, we didn't question it any further. Then the order discard. Now this is, I think, a little bit different than Combat Commander Europe. If I remember right, before, your year and troop quality kind of determined how many cards you could draw, so on and so forth, or orders that you could play and what you could discard. Because like Germany could discard a whole bunch of cards, Russia not as many, and it was to simulate how well supplied and things they were. Here this tells you, and this might be different per scenario, and I think I like this because then each scenario can truly be unique in some capacity. Basically it says the German player can play 2 orders in a turn, and he can actually discard up to 3 cards. So as the attacker in this scenario, the German player is coming equipped. Because there was a point where my son had like 3 command confusion cards, and he was like, oh, well, hey, let me just take one of my turns and swap those all out. And he could. The French player, on the other hand, actually, I didn't think it would be that big of a deal, but it's a huge deal. I could play 2 orders, same as the Germans, but I could only discard 1 card. That meant if I had a bunch of crap in my hand, I was trying to find ways to actually play cards as a way to cycle new cards, because I could only discard 1 card. So I kind of felt like I was playing with my hands tied behind my back a little bit, because the German onslaught was just relentless, and I was just trying to find creative ways to get cards out of my hands so I could cycle through the cards I wanted. So very interesting gameplay concept, and I think that's going to be, I think that's just a very cool. So instead of limiting it to specifically like a year and a nationality and a scenario, it's limited to the scenario. So I think that's pretty cool. Then you had your posture, so you knew if you were on the attack or the defense. So this is something, I think the turn tracker here, if I remember right, I thought this had a little reminder where if you were on the attack or the defense, this would tell you how many cards you got to draw. Nope, I guess not. I thought it did. So that was something I had to look up in the book because I didn't remember how many cards you start with. Attackers get 6 cards, defender gets 4 cards in their hand, and then if you play a recon, you get 5 cards. So I had to look that up and remember that. So no big deal there. So we knew then how many cards we get to play, and then how many orders to play, and how many we can discard. And then we had our objective chits. This one, each player got to draw 1, but there was no open chit. So I had a hidden one. My son had a hidden one. Then objective control listed some spots on the map then that were under French control. And then your setup told you exactly where to place the French troops, and then again the German troops along the southern edge. And first turn went to the German. There were some special rules for this. First, repos. It said that set up the French leaders are placed. It just tells me where to put everybody. And then it says there was a fog. There's a -1 fog hindrance in every hex of the map until the time marker enters the 6th space. We forgot. We totally did not play with any fog. I don't think, honestly, I don't think that would have changed combat results that much, because that was a penalty we forgot to apply across the board. So we were still equal. I really don't think it would have made that much of a difference, but I could be wrong. But we totally forgot to play with the -1 fog. Plus, since we didn't even advance the time marker once, we would have had fog. We had fog the entire battle if we had played with it. Hold the village. The French player may not gain exit victory points, so we had to stay and fight. German player could get exit points. He was only allowed to exit off of 2 points that you can't see on the map because of the way I got the camera. But the German player didn't need to exit troops. He actually just kind of walked through the village and wiped out the French. Which is interesting, because when we played, I didn't read the situation report. I just set up the game and we started playing. At the end of the game, I came back and read the story, and it said the Germans were supposed to win anyway. So it played out fine. I thought maybe I had made some rules mistakes because it just felt pretty easy for the Germans. But actually, I think we did everything. I think we did everything about as good as we could, other than the -1 fog. And the results kind of matched the story. So I thought, yeah, I think we're okay. Let's move on to mission 2. So how did it play out? Okay, well, again, without laying out a bunch of counters, use your imagination with me, if you will. So my son, he's got his Germans deployed here along this southern edge. When he first deployed, he had 1 unit in every single hex, just about. They were all spread out. Because you start with like 7 troops, a machine gun, and 2 officers. So he had like 9 hexes. And I explained stacking, and he didn't change. He just kept this long line. But when we talked about, when we read about the highest ranking officer rule, he then changed it so that he could do an activation with his number 2 guy, and then he could activate, I think he did arrange to where eventually he could activate his entire line of troops. So that was a change he made before we started. And that's where the slaughter began. So the French in this scenario actually begin with a couple of troops in, I think, like these outer houses here, a couple of these outer houses, like one here. And then they start with some troops back up in the village. They're not laid out in any way that is good for the French player. I spent my game trying to move people up to form some kind of defensive line, because none of my troops really started where they could take advantage of leadership. That was super annoying, because I think I start with a machine gun unit in this little village right here, in this house right here, and I think I get like 1 troop here, but my leadership is all back in the village. So if I want this guy to shoot, I'd have to spin a fire order on just him, and he'd have no backup. Whereas the Germans, because they were prepared, he got to activate his entire line, and then those suckers just kind of moved in like a wheel. They just kind of wheeled in a little bit, and then just kind of marched up into the town. And the thing is, he drew the offensive card. That was in his first hand of 6. And that's when I had to read that and see what it was. So he played the offensive card, activated his entire row, wheeled them, and then after they kind of moved into a nice little line along here, he activated a fire order and just decimated this poor little guy in the house. Well, by decimated, I mean he got him flipped to broke. He broke the guy right away. Because he was able to bring a whole bunch of firepower. He had his machine gun unit, he had supporting troops that were all within range, because the range is about 5. The machine gun has a range of like 13. So even from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, like his guys were all in range to start, of the house. After he moved, all his guys are in range to just start bringing the pain. And that's what they did. And because the French troops are so spread out, when I try to retaliate, I'm only activating 1 French soldier, and he has to, he would shoot, but, he's flinging out maybe a 13 on the offense. But because French went second, when I did get to shoot with this guy, and he was broke, he couldn't fire his machine gun, and he only has a firepower of like 1 or 2 on his broken side, it was like, there's nothing really. Well, actually, now that I think about it, can I even shoot on the broken side? I don't remember. Hold on. Can they shoot? Yeah, but they have like a terrible firepower. So it was like, it was just a bloodbath. The French, I eventually was able to get a couple of French leaders up here in this middle section, and we were actually able to do some melee assaults in a couple of spots. But even that's devastating. Melee is just as devastating in this game as it is in Europe. Basically, you move the soldiers together into the same hex that you want to fight, and you combine firepowers. And then I don't think you get to add your weapon firepower. It's just the firepower of the people. You play any ambush cards that you have, and then you roll a die, and the higher firepower total wins. Well, I was lucky. I assaulted a broken unit, and I was able to kill a broken unit. Great. But over here somewhere, we did another assault where it was one platoon against one platoon, just platoon, and they got a tie. In a tie, both platoons were wiped out. So even though I was able to, I think I ended up maybe destroying 3 platoons, maybe 3 German platoons, but he was able to take out 6, excuse me, 6 French platoons, and he won just by the surrender point. Yeah, it was just a bloodbath. Could I have played differently? Yes, because the mistake that I did was I think I started with 1 French troop in a house by himself, and I actually moved another French platoon up to take another building, and that was bad too, because again, he was able to concentrate his firepower on each like individual house, and he could break them and then later take them out easy while I was still moving troops forward. So if I was going to play again, I would definitely try to set up a nice defensive line in the middle and take all these houses to advantage, and then make him move all his people up, and then hopefully we would be able to have a more cohesive return fire than what my son brought, because his people were already in line to take advantage of the highest leader rule or the offensive rule where, you know, they're all adjacent. I just could not muster. But it fit the story, because that's kind of what the story says. Bitter street fighting drove out the French defenders. That, we played that to a T. Yes, German attackers drove out the French defenders. So that played out exactly like this. I call it a story, but that's what the situation report read. All right. So I didn't really explain a whole lot of rules, okay? And I you know, maybe we'll do like a rules tutorial, but I just really wanted to share my excitement in this, because this was a really fun game that we ran into. And so I wanted to show you now some of the comparison of components a little bit. Starting with the map, I saw, I think on Board Game Geek, somebody laid out components side by side to show you the maps and some of the counters. So I'm just going to grab a map. So we won't spend too much time talking about this. When I first got the game, I thought that these hexes on the new maps were smaller than the hexes on the old map. It actually turns out they're the same size. Someone had asked that comment, and then someone, I forget who from Hexasim, answered and said, no, it's the exact same size, and it is. I think the difference is the playable map area. Let's see. Oh, it's like the same. It's like the same. Same. I don't know if you can see that. I think my hand goes off the map, but the Great War map is like 1 hex wider, but they are about the same length. Actually, I think the Combat Commander one, it depends how I line up. They're like the same. They're the same this way, but it looks like the Great War is one wider. But yeah, they're the same size hex, so you can still fit several counters into each hex. But the artwork has definitely improved. One thing with GMT games, and I'll say this, and I read somewhere, Jim Day, who did the Panzer series, a lot of people were complaining about how dull the Panzer maps look. And to some degree, you could say, you know, the Combat Commander maps. And this is what Jim Day said. Well, I'm going to paraphrase. Basically, the focus is on playability. They don't want there to be any question about, is this jungle? What elevation is this? And that's what you get in these maps. Do they look good? Yeah, I think they do. The old Combat Commander Europe maps still look good. When I think about the evolution of games, because I remember when I first got these maps, I thought, wow, these maps are gorgeous. They're not bad, and they're very functional. It's very easy, and it's clear to see what terrain type you're dealing with. But check it out. I think the artwork is just stellar here. When we did the unboxing, I mentioned it before. I think the artwork on these maps is second to none. Even when you look at the moon, I know it's not the moon, but just this crater-filled wasteland The art is superb. And I still have no question over what is what. I still can tell this is the broken field, whatever they call it. I forget, but it's rough field. I can still tell what the houses are. I can still tell what the foresty areas are. There's still no question about what the roads are. So there's nothing that says you can't have a good looking game and a functional game as well. So the maps I think got really, really well. The counters are still very, very similar. I have here, these are some of the French. Oh, my counter trays are way over there. Let me see if I can just grab here. The counters, the artwork is, I think, still really good with Combat Commander Europe. Let me just grab some French. I can't pronounce it. These are the French territory. Sorry, French is not one of my languages. I'm going to put this in my hand, and let's see if we can do this number. Yeah. So here you have Combat Commander Europe, and I love the line art on those. Now, what you have in Grey War Commander, still great line art, but they actually have a little bit more color and a little bit more detail. So the counters, I think, look great. They still look good here, but there's not a whole lot of difference, right? But it is a step up, like the maps. It's a step up. But I always thought these were great. This is one reason I love Combat Commander Europe over, say, Advanced Squad Leader, is I love the counter work. And what they have in Great War Commander, again, very, very similar, but a little bit of a step up. There's some more color in your troops. So that's fine. Let's look at the cards real quick. Put my elite units back. I brought some American cards here. Again, there's not a whole lot of difference in your cards. Here's Combat Commander, here's Europe. Let's see if I can hold these. Here's Europe. And very clean, very legible. It's great. You know, no confusion in the dice. Everything you need is there, easy to read. But just a touch of color, does wonders. I like the parchment feel, and what's nice is between the Americans, the French, and the Germans, they each have just a slightly different parchment look on their action cards. They have just a little bit of color, which is great. They're very visually appealing. So not much of a difference, but I think, again, just a little bit of a step up from what we had. But, to be fair, I know some people might be like, but Eddie, there's like a 10-year gap between the two games. Yeah, there sure is. The folks at Hexasim had some time to kind of think out how they wanted their game to look. And so far, all the games I've seen from Hexasim have looked fantastic. So no problems there. So we looked at some map differences, some counter differences, and some of the card differences. So as you can see, ultimately, it's a Combat Commander game. You're going to have no problem slipping in. In fact, when I did the unboxing, I was talking about another concern is like, how would they do the rally? How would they do artillery? And it's just like Combat Commander Europe. You're going to have your radio in order to use artillery, and generally that's going to be assigned by the scenario. Or I'm sure if you get some kind of random event that lets you get a reinforcement, you could get a radio that way. Otherwise, depending on the scenario, you're just going to have a whole bunch of useless artillery cards. There is air assault. I didn't draw an air assault, and my son didn't draw an air assault. So we didn't get to play with the air assault rules, and they actually have in here, a pretty good explanation of how to do air assault. I'm kind of glad we didn't. Even though the game is similar, I didn't want to overwhelm myself, with whole new stuff. I'm trying to see, yeah. So here's some air assault example. Where air assault must start right here somewhere. At the advance, air assault. There it is, air assault. So not that there's a whole lot of rules for air assault, but I'm kind of glad. Well, there's not much for it at all. So if we'd had to use air assault, probably not that difficult to bring in. So we didn't do air assault, but we did get to do offensive. We didn't have artillery. We didn't have ordnance for this particular scenario either, but the ordnance rules look the same. Oh yeah, the other one too is the recovery. Now, like I said, in Combat Commander Pacific, I thought I had liked that one better because you would play your recovery card and it would have like recovery points. So you could recover like that many people. Like you could remove that much suppression worth of units and unbreak that many. So if you had like recovery 3 or something like that. It's been a while since I played Pacific, so that's how my mind remembers it. Whereas with Combat Commander Europe and Great War, when you play that recovery, you remove all suppression from everybody. So if you have a lot of suppressed units, it's a great card to get. I think Combat Commander Pacific was a little more restrictive. It wasn't like a, fix everything kind of a card. It was, you had to decide which ones to fix. And then in Combat Commander Europe, it gets rid of all the suppression, and then you would roll for morale to see who recovers. So that one worked the same, and artillery worked the same. So again, this is probably the broken record time. If you like Combat Commander Europe and the Combat Commander series, I think you're going to absolutely love Great War Commander. The gameplay experience is still there. The randomness is still there. We were still drawing sniper events. He even broke a unit of mine with a sniper event. And that's super annoying. It's like, up to that point, A5. We're all on the far side of the map. Nothing happening in A. And then my son draws like J6. And it's like, yep, that's the one you needed. You broke one of my important people. And that one sucked. Let me tell you, that one sucked because that unit was already on the receiving end of a lot of fire, which is why, like, he was making that was his attack roll, and he drew a sniper event. So it broke my unit, and then we resolved fire, and that was able to destroy the unit because the sniper broke it, and then the fire from combat destroyed it. I mean, it's like, yep, it's a Combat Commander thing. Things happen when you least expect it. But it was oh so enjoyable. So I heartily recommend that you check this one out if you haven't yet. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Will this change your opinion on this series? If you've ever been on the fence, I would say of all of them to get, this would be a good one to start with. If anything, like I said, since I did not read this word for word, I can't tell you. The rules for this game are already tight. It's a very good set of rules. But I think this adds a few things that you won't see in the other games that make this really evocative to the era played. So if you're on the fence about jumping in, I don't think you would go wrong getting into Great War Commander. If you did not like the Commander series, I don't think there's enough here that would make you say, oh, okay, I changed my mind. This is the best series ever. But I think if you had a chance to play it, I don't know. I think this does such a good job of evoking World War I tactical warfare. If anything, I would say that was more chaotic because it was just the sheer insanity of these huge charges and people being mowed down. I almost think the randomness in those events fit this era better than they do in their Combat Commander counterparts. Because all the crazy stuff that was happening here totally didn't even bother me. It was like, yeah, I could see that happening. You hear a lot about snipers in World War I. I mean, you had snipers in World War II, but it just seemed to fit here. Like, yeah, everything that happened really made it feel like, yes, this is what should be happening. So I think you'll like it. I really think you do. Now, again, if you watch this and you don't like it, feel free to share comments, share why you don't like it. I'm sure for some of the reasons why you don't like it is probably why a lot of other people do. But if you haven't played it yet, I'd say play it before you pass judgment. You might find yourself going, you know what, this system works for this. All right, great. Thank you for watching. Leave some comments, and we'll see you later. Bye.